Chapter 7 Clunk. Fortunately for the Bottersnakes, it was a good drying day, and those that had fallen in the water were soon dry after they'd been hanging up by their tails for a bit. Smiggles had not fallen in. His head had been sat on most severely, and now the king was making him sit on what was left of his dream bridge. This was awkward for Smiggles because he was tired and badly wanted 40 winks, but he knew what would happen if he took them. The other Bottersnakes sat in a red-eared circle on the island trying to think of another gumble trap. As for the Gumbles themselves, they had tiptoed away and were playing hide-and-seek with some lizards. "Now what I think," said Chank importantly, "is this. I think it's the one that goes tink what causes all the bother. That's what I think." He was not to know, of course, that Tinkingumble had lost his tink. "It's a pity you don't tink instead of thinking so much," said Glob in his nasty way. "It'd be much more useful." "Nincome snake!" shouted Chank angrily, and would have said much more, but the king roared "Snonk!" very loudly. The king said, "Can any Bottersnake go tink?" They all tried and went tink in their fat growling voices, but none of them sounded a bit like Tinkingumble, and no good ideas came. In fact, it sounded more like a lot of crows trying to sing "Pop Goes a Weasel," and it made the king's ear ache. "Idiots!" he shouted. Snonk! That Tinkingumble doesn't say tink, he just goes tink like as if the noise came from inside. "Like hitting the edge of a glass with a spoon," said Chank. "Like hitting you on the head with a lump of wood," roared the king, who was tired of Chank's being clever all the time. He tried it to see. Chank's head was so thick and hard that when he whacked with a stick it just went clack. "No good at all," roared the king happily. "Just goes clack. Hark at it, clack. Clack, clack." The king was enjoying himself no end. He whacked as many Bottersnakes as he could catch on the head and to see if any would go tink, but their heads were so thick and hard they all sounded the same as Chank's. "Not a tink in the whole darn lot of you," the king growled, brandishing his stick. "I never heard a more clack-headed lot of Bottersnakes in my life." "Try hitting yourself on the head, then," suggested Smiggles cheekily. The king could not reach him where he was sitting on the bridge. "No one will ever know what my head sounds like," the king bawled. "Kings don't get whacked on the head, that's why they're kings. Anyway, you go to sleep, Smiggles. Go on, go to sleep." Smiggles didn't go to sleep. He dared not, though he closed his eyes a moment to make the king stop yelling at him. Maybe it was through Smiggles closing his eyes. Maybe white ants had been eating the wood. Whatever the cause, one of the no fishing notices just then began to topple over. The king did not see it falling, and it whacked him on the head so hard that it drove him in the ground up to his waist. But the interesting thing was that the royal head did not go clank like the others. It made a good, hollow, satisfying clunk, which proves that kings' heads are different. The no fishing notice disappeared, and the king looked surprised to find himself waist deep in the earth. "Come and get me out of this bog," he said. "I've just had the idea for the best gumble trap of all." He seemed not to have felt the whack on his head a bit. He called the others into a ring around him and talked, and as he talked the circle of red-hot ears gradually stopped glowing and became an ordinary dirty black. "Something like a bird with a broken wing," the king was saying, "crying piteously for help, and the Gumbles, being soft-hearted things, will come along to see what the cries are about, and will jump out of the bushes and grab 'em, and shout 'Got you!' and pop 'em into jam tins, and quick waddle home for the king's party. Hoo-hoo-hoo, that's the best gumble trap of all." And the Bottersnakes leaped around as gleefully as if they had caught the Gumbles already. "Only thing," said Glob, stopping a leap in midair and falling to the ground with a thud. "What are we going to do for a bird with a broken wing?" "Aha," the king said. "That is the cleverest part of my clever idea. Chank!" Chank jumped a foot out of fright and turned pale. "Be a bird with a broken wing," ordered the king. "Go on, be one." Chank protested that, though he was clever at most things, being a bird with a broken wing was not one of the things he was particularly clever at, and that he could be much cleverer being clever at something else. No one listened. So he got down on the ground and rolled about, feebly flapping one arm, and called out in a piteous, fat, growly voice, "Help! Help! I'm a poor little boy with a broken wing." How's that? He didn't look at all like a bird, only like a fat Bottersnake rolling on the ground. That's not nearly clever enough, the king snorted, and he tickled his tummy a bit. Alas, he said, he's too big. Shrink him. Taking no notice of Chang's howls, they dipped him carefully in the creek until he was about as big as a pigeon. They put him on the bank opposite the island and tucked his wiry tail in so it wouldn't show. A few feathers scattered about helped to make it look real. Then, with the gumble trap set, they hid themselves securely in the bush. The gumbles were hiding too, from the lizards. It was the lizards' turn to seek. No peeping now, they shouted, for these lizards were tricky that way. They had no eyelids to close. The gumbles ducked into long grass and hurried toward the creek. Not a snake to be seen. On what was left of Sminkle's bridge, they smartly made themselves into a gumble rope, which is a bit like a string of sausages. One end of the gumble rope tied itself in a half-hitch around a bridge rail. The other threw itself over the water and landed in the island. The half-hitch undid itself, and the other end hauled it in until the whole gumbo rope was safely over the water. It was very pretty to watch. Then they saw Chank. Careful, they said to each other, it's a botter snake. I'm not a botter snake, said Chank angrily. I'm a poor little birdie with a broken wing. Help, help, he added. The Gumbos could see perfectly well that he was a botter snake and not a bird, but they couldn't resist having a bit of fun with a chance like this. Poor little birdie, they called. How did you break your wing? Fell out of that tree I did, said Chank. Came down plop when they saw that branch off to make a bridge. Took me by surprise, see? Ah, said Happy Gumbo with a wink. That was a clever idea to make a bridge like that. Chank sat up and beamed. It was clever, wasn't it? That was my idea. I'm the cleverest botter snake of the lot, and I ought to be... You just said you weren't a botter snake, said Jolly Gumbo. What sort of a bird are you? You heard wrong, said Chank quickly. I said her cuckoo shrike. There's brains for you, you thought. Sing us a song, Cuckoo Shrike, the Gumbles begged. Tweet, 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 growled Chank. It was the fall he had, the Gumble sniggered. Must have broken his voice as well, poor bird. They made him fearfully mixed up then by asking questions about Mother Cuckoo Shrike's nest and her eggs. For Gumbles know all about these things. Chank said they were very fond of eggs and had them hard-boiled mostly. The Gumbles began to go giggly, which turned the Cuckoo Shrike's ears bright. Stop asking silly questions, he shouted. Come over and help me with my broken wing. Suppose we hang you up by your tail, Jolly Gumbo suggested, and you can sing us another song while you're drying out. If you promise the others won't grab us, Happy Gumbo had sense enough to add. Quick and crafty, Chank said, Grab you? Oh no, they've all gone home to have the king's party. Those silly Gumbles, who were quite giggly, believed him. They trooped over the sawn-off branch, and a 1, 2, 3 all-together pull, they hoisted the shrunk Chank by his tail into a banksia bush, where he would catch the wind. Now sing us another song, they said. Chippy, chippy, tweet, tweet, sang Chank. Once again, and once too often, the Gumbles went giggly. Rolling about quite hopelessly, quite helplessly, they suddenly found themselves surrounded by a ring of green and wrinkled faces with long red ears, upward slanted eyes, noses like coal scuttles, and little toadstools. Got you, shouted the botter snakes, and they grabbed those giggling Gumbles and popped them into jam tins.